Hey there, and thanks for joining. If you clicked on this video, then you're interested in buying land, and we're here to help. My name is Joshua. I'm a custom home builder in Northern Colorado, and I'm joined today by Shana Morgan, who is an ALC certified realtor with over 24 years experience in real estate and has facilitated the buying and selling of over 1 million acres of land worth roughly $14 million annually from Colorado to South Dakota and everywhere in between. She's going to help us walk through the process of buying land, starting from the broadest perspective of how to find land, down to thinking through utilities and balancing your specific site. So, Shana, first off, thank you for being here. The number one question I get time and time again when people are considering building a custom home is, where do I even start? And eventually they learn that they need to start by buying land. But the follow-up question that I automatically get is, how do I buy land? And so I wanted to kind of set the stage with, why is land so complicated, and how did it get here from your perspective, and how does one navigate all these issues with little to no experience?
Well, thank you, first of all, for doing this. I think it's important to be educated when you're buying anything, especially real estate. It's a large investment. And so to be educated going in is a very smart decision. So yes, it's complicated. You know, we're sitting in a home that's already built. The zoning's already been done. All of the infrastructure's already in. Land has a lot of variables to it. And so it can get complicated in a hurry based on what you want to do with it and what the land may be suited for. The other thing that has made it more complicated, especially in this area, is demand. We've had a large influx of people come in. Demand has increased. At the same time, we started to see jurisdictions redo their land use codes in order to meet that demand. And then COVID hit, and it seemed like I went from trying to find a buyer for my 5-6 acre parcels to having a huge list of buyers. The demand for a little bit larger space to live on has increased. So I think that combination of demand, land use code changes, and land just being open to a few different variables as you walk through the process, it's complicated inherently.
Yeah, no question about that. So let's start at a very high level. How does even one start to look for land, and where do they go online? Where does someone like yourself first list land that you may have available for sale?
Sure. So we as real estate brokers typically will put our listings on an MLS, a multiple listing service. Mm-hmm. That multiple listing service then syndicates to the Zillows, the realtors, many other sites. So the consumer facing website is typically taking information from the multiple listing sites. So I think to start, just get on the internet and start looking at those sites. I think it's a great place to find kind of a general understanding of what you might be spending for a vacant piece of property.
Okay. So then from that perspective, if you just start looking around, I mean, there are plenty of listings out there, but it's very, very confusing as to what those listings means, right? So you can see somebody who's listed land for $200,000, somebody who's listed land for $500,000. How does one start to think about like a budget and what that means if you're ultimately trying to build a custom home and you're looking at it and you just see all these lands? How does somebody start to put together a picture of what it means from buying this land versus that land, and where to go from there?
Yeah, I think you need to understand. So what's your desire? Do you want to be in a community near schools, parks? Do you want wide open spaces? Do you want to have chickens and livestock? That's very different parcels of land. Mm-hmm. I think getting a builder involved early and understanding the cost to build will help so that you understand what your budget is for the piece of land. You mentioned, looking at a $200,000 piece of land and maybe $500,000 or more. The typical algorithms on the internet will value, you get the Zillow's estimate based on the neighborhood sales, the square feet. You can't do that with land. There's no algorithm for, has the water tap been paid? Do minerals come along with that piece of land? And so making sure that you connect with a professional early on in the process I know I'm biased, so would recommend that, you hire somebody like an ALC to be on your side to help advise you. Get your builder involved early on so that you can understand some of those costs to build and then be able to frame your budget.
So let's talk about, you mentioned getting a realtor on board. What are 3 to 5 ways to find like a really good realtor specializing in land specifically? Because I think that's the hard part. You can find realtors all over the place who are very good at finding houses, and houses are definitely one thing, but to your point, the algorithms and everything else, even on Zillow, can't figure it out. So how do you find the right person to help represent you to find land specifically?
Yeah, you're right. Most brokers are residential brokers. That's a skill set that's very different from land. So some ways to pick the right realtor, I would say, talk to the builder. Do they have partners that they've worked with that they know understand this process? Again, I'm biased, so I would say look for an ALC. That stands for Accredited Land Consultant. ALCs have gone through, you have to have a set number of years experience, you have to have additional education in land-specific classes, and you have to have a proven track record of only land sales. So getting an ALC, that there's a baseline of experience. I would also recommend, just looking at the listings that you're seeing. Who's the listing agent on the listing? Maybe not the broker that shows up as the one to call, but who's the listing agent? They obviously have done something to get that listing. Give them a call. When you find a few brokers, call them. Not all of us work well with each other, and so ask them some questions. What's their experience in land? What do they know about the jurisdiction that piece of land is in? What do they know about maybe the water rights that are going to be complicated on this? And just have that conversation. I think doing those things would land you to the right person.
And I think that's super key, because I think as you go through this process, having the right realtor who actually understands it and is educated in land is such a key factor of that. So now you've found a realtor. What's next? Do you start by figuring out the budget first, or locations you want to be in first?
Again, going back to what's your goal? Do you want to be in town? Do you want to be out of town? Do you want some acreage? You have to then identify what is your budget. So talk to the builder. What's the cost to build? What's your budget for the land going to be? So I think it's a combination of both. Getting an experienced broker involved in that process early on can really be beneficial.
Now, I think you've touched on it a couple of times, but can you briefly describe, from a customer who's trying to identify land and trying to understand from this perspective, you've talked about sort of if you want to be out and having lots of acreage with farm stock or anything else along those lines versus in the city. I think there's 3 major categories of land. One is the established subdivision. One is partial developments, which is sort of a combination of established subdevelopment, and then raw undeveloped land. Can you kind of talk through what each of those 3 categories and real just top line, so somebody can understand what they're looking at and sort of thinking about the process in that perspective?
Sure. So a subdivision already has streets and roads. Typically, you can see what the homes in that neighborhood are going to look like. You've got kind of the in-between where maybe it's a more rural development that may not have all of the rules and restrictions that the full-blown subdivision does. And then you've got, it's just what you said, it's raw, it's vacant land. Maybe it was a farm last year, the owners carved it up and now ready to sell for a home. Those are 3 distinct pieces of land that are going to have their own unique challenges along with them.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good set to kind of set that framework so people can, as they're watching through this video and everything, can understand that there are kind of those 3 different levels of land, and the complexity changes on each one of those, and sort of your investment and your investment risk associated with each one of those.